Hey everyone, welcome to the week 2 lecture. We're going to be going over chapter 2 this week, performance management process. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter this week. I know I said last week I'd try to keep it between 5 and 10 minutes, and that ended up being almost half an hour. So I'm going to shoot for somewhere in the 10-minute range, maybe give or take a couple minutes. Okay, let's get into it. All right, so here's the general overview of the process. We have prerequisites, performance planning, performance execution, performance assessment, performance review, and performance renewal and recontracting. Here it is in it's depicted here in a sort of flow chart. So let's get into each different stage of the process in a little bit more detail. First, we have prerequisites. So the prerequisite stage, there are two things that are going on here. The knowledge of the organization's mission and strategic goals. This plays a big role in the prerequisite stage. You really need to know what the organization's mission and goals are, because the performance management system needs to be aligned with the mission and goals. This is something we talked about last chapter a lot. And you have to have knowledge of the job in question. Of course, if you're designing a performance management system and you're going through a performance management process, both the designer of the performance management process, the architect of the system of the process, and the people who are involved in the process, the manager and the employee, should all have knowledge of the job in question. I mean, that seems pretty obvious that the manager and the employee should have knowledge of the job in question, but you'd be surprised how often that there are pieces missing in the managers and the employees' understanding of the job. So these are the two main pieces of the prerequisite stage. And the mission and goals, it's important to know the mission and goals because this can have a cascade effect throughout the entire organization. The organization wants to sort of instill the mission and the goals into the performance management system, so they will sort of be instilled into the entire unit within which the performance management system is being used, and it'll be transferred to the employees also, who are involved in this performance management system and involved in the unit. Okay, and knowledge of the job is important because there are a lot of components that go into the job: activities, tasks, products, services, any key processes that the job entails. So, like I said, there can be gaps in the knowledge of the job between the manager and the employee. The employee may be new. The employee may the job may have changed recently. So it's important to consider the knowledge of the job when we're looking at the performance management process. And as a prerequisite, it should be considered before the process takes place. Excuse me. Okay. So a job description. Understanding the job requires that you understand the job description. So the job description requires you to understand KSAs. Those are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are associated with the job. And I won't get too much into detail into those three aspects, but you should know those. And I encourage you to look over those in your text in a bit more detail. Those are knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay. Job duties. Those are the explicit terms that the explicit tasks that the employee is expected to perform, and the working conditions. That has to do with the environment that the employee performs that job within. So, yeah, these are all very important parts of the job description. Okay, and to get a comprehensive picture of a job description, to get a comprehensive picture of an employee's job, a job analysis needs to be performed. So a job analysis is performed using a variety of tools. Practitioners can use well, I say practitioners, that can be managers or anybody who's developing the performance management system, who has input in the performance management process. These people are going to use interviews. They're going to use observations. They're going to use questionnaires to uncover these three pieces depicted here: the job duties, the KSAs, and the working conditions. Okay, so nobody is just guessing off the top of their head what it takes for somebody to do a job, because there may be things that the average person, that an outside onlooker doesn't know about. So you really need to go in and ask those people who are doing the job. That's where the interviews come in. And you need to observe these people on the job. That's where the observations come in. And you need to ask them questionnaires you need to provide them with questionnaires that have been proven to elicit useful information. So that's job analysis in a nutshell, used to determine the job description, used to understand the job. Okay. So let's move on to rater biases. And rater biases are susceptible to all these different types of biases. Three are listed here, the three most important ones being self-serving bias, social projection bias, and false consensus bias. So I'll do my best to explain these three here. Self-serving bias is the tendency for experts to report or employees to report aspects of the job that help their cause, that are self-serving. They make the employee seem more important. The employee may be wanting to be seen as doing more work than other people, as working harder than other people, as having a job that's more important to the organization than other employees. So he or she may, in answering questions, in answering interview questions, or in contributing to a questionnaire about his or her job, this employee may provide information that makes him or herself look better in those ways that I just mentioned. So that's self-serving bias, something you have to look out for when you are determining the tasks and KSAs. Social projection bias. This has to do with the employee feeling as though others understand his or her job at the same level that he or she does. So the employee may not be as detailed, may not be as thorough when detailing his or her job, because that employee assumes that everybody knows what his or her job is about. That employee is so familiar with his or her own job that that employee assumes that other people know as well, and thus that employee won't go into as much detail, won't provide those really important pieces of information that we may be looking for, or that managers may be looking for, that architects of a performance management system may be looking for. False consensus bias is when employees, how can I put this? When employees feel that that others around them, other employees or managers, or those asking the questions, those designing the performance management system, feel the same way as they do. So it's similar to social projection bias in that employees may leave out useful information, may leave out certain aspects of the job that they might see as unimportant, and they believe that other people see it as unimportant as well, when in fact it might be as important. That's false consensus bias in a nutshell. Or they may be playing up parts of the job that they see as very important because they believe that other people see it that way as well, when in fact that is not the case. So definitely read up on these three types of bias. They'll be in your textbook. Not sure if I did a great job explaining them right there, but go ahead and read up on them on your own. I encourage you to do that. So to control for these types of biases, usually there's some type of rater training introduced into the performance management process. It should only take about 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a huge undertaking. It's mostly a five-step process. Do I have the slide here? I do have the slide here. Okay, so definitions of the rating dimensions are provided. Scale anchors are provided. So we're going to have sort of a scale for the raters to provide their opinions on certain items. And when I say items, we're talking about tasks and KSAs that have been identified as important for a specific job, which will be used in the performance management process. Okay, so rating dimensions are defined, scale anchors are defined, behaviors that are indicative of each rating dimension are given as examples. So then you allow the raters to practice rating certain tasks and rating certain behaviors, and then they're given feedback on their ratings. And usually you'll have multiple raters, multiple raters providing feedback on different items, and levels of agreement or disagreement between certain items will be examined. So this is how rater training works. Go ahead and read a bit more about it in your textbook. I encourage you to do that. They go into it in a bit more detail there. Okay. Cover everything on this slide. 5 steps. Reduces exaggeration of the importance of certain tasks and KSAs. Again, so exaggeration of the importance of certain tasks and KSAs, that has to do with the biases that we discussed. Mostly the social projection. Well, all of them actually. Yeah. Okay. All right, now we'll move into performance planning. Okay. With performance planning, you're looking at you want to look at what will be considered a good result, what will be considered a bad result in terms of employee behavior, in terms of employee contribution to the organization. What's going to let us know that the employee has succeeded, or what's going to let us know that the employee is close to succeeding, not close to succeeding, still has a ways to go, or if they've done something that's totally in the wrong direction from what the organization needs or what the manager has defined. You're going to need to define what results look like, good results and bad results, okay? And this is very important for the planning stage. This is not something to be discussed after an employee has already performed certain tasks or engaged in certain behaviors, because that would be unfair. They would certainly see that as unfair. These things need to be discussed and laid out and standardized and made explained explicitly to the employee before he or she does their job, so he or she knows what to do. So we'll look at key accountabilities. These are broad areas of a job which the employee is responsible for producing results. So these are sort of overall more broad objectives, and then you move into the specific objectives. So these are certain statements of specific outcomes, producing a certain number of units, or selling a certain number of units or completing something in a defined timetable. So these are very important, and these specific objectives are measurable. They're measurable in nature. Okay, and then we have the performance standards, and performance standards are called the yardstick. I believe your book will refer to them as the yardstick to evaluate how well employees have achieved each of these objectives. Usually refers mostly to the specific objectives, not so much to the key accountabilities because those are more general in nature. But the performance standards will tell us how well employees have achieved their goals or achieved the goals that were laid out for them. Okay. Performance planning. Then we also have to think about behaviors. So in this previous slide, we were talking about results. This slide, we're talking about behaviors, how a job is done. So certainly there's more than one path to the same result, but if employees are expected to behave or to act in a certain way to get that job done, they should be made aware of that, and this should be implemented into the performance management process in the performance planning stage. Okay, this should be explicitly expressed to the employee during the planning stage. Okay. Competencies. Okay, so competencies are the measurable clusters of KSAs, which are knowledge. KSA stands for knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay, and they're critical in determining how results will be achieved. So when you're looking at specific objectives and these performance standards, and you're looking at behaviors, sort of how a job is done, how are employees going to achieve these specific objectives, how are employees going to achieve certain performance standards, KSAs need to be taken into account when you're considering how employees will get the job done. Okay, knowledge, skills, and abilities tell us how able an employee is in achieving these goals. So they sort of give us a baseline, and then you can see how far knowledge, skills, and abilities have increased during an employee's tenure at an organization. Okay, read more about KSAs in your textbook. They go into a bit more detail there, and those are very important. Okay, performance planning. Okay, so development plan. All right, so after you've looked at the competencies, the competencies are sort of, let me just flip back here for a second. What an employee needs to know, the skills the employee needs to have, the ability the employee needs to have to get the job done. You can also measure how employees are getting better in these knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay, and that's sort of the development plan. That is the development plan, I should say. So if an employee is low on a certain skill, if they're low on a certain ability, or they're lacking in knowledge in some area, these can be areas for improvement. And during the performance planning stage, employees and managers should work together to develop a development plan. That lays out specific goals to be achieved in each of these areas. So if a manager wants an employee to get better at doing task A, then that should be explicitly defined during the performance planning stage. It should be part of the development plan, where an employee can look back at any time and say, oh, okay, I was supposed to improve by this much on task A by our next meeting, so I know what my my manager wants from me. I know how I'm going to be evaluated next time. Okay, so that's the development plan piece. Okay. All right, now we'll get into the responsibilities of the employee and the employer, the employee and the manager, I should say. So these are all pretty straightforward, and they'll be laid out in your book and expanded on. Commitment to goal achievement. Of course, the employee should be committed to the goals that have been laid out in the performance management meeting. The employee should seek out feedback and coaching. Okay, they shouldn't rely on the manager to come to them and provide them with feedback. If they want feedback, if they want coaching, they should go out and get it. Managers are busy, and it's certainly part of their job to provide feedback, but they may not always have the time. They may assume that the employee might not need it or want it. So if an employee does need it or want it, they themselves should go and seek it out. Okay, that has to do with communication with supervisor as well. The next point there. So if an employee needs something from the supervisor, from the manager, he or she should communicate that to them and go get that. Don't expect a supervisor or a manager to read. They shouldn't expect a supervisor or a manager to read their mind. If you want something, you should go out and get it. It's the employee's responsibility. Collecting and sharing performance data. So any data that the employee has that gives the manager or supervisor a better picture of how they're doing, of how the employee is progressing, of how the employee is meeting or not meeting their goals. It's the employee's responsibility to collect that data and share it with the manager or supervisor. Of course, the manager and supervisor will probably have data of their own regarding the employee's performance, but it's likely that the employee has some as well that the manager or supervisor does not have access to, and they should keep records of that and share it for purposes of the performance execution phase. And then preparing for performance reviews. Employees should not go into performance reviews totally unprepared and unable to do anything productive. They should certainly be prepared. Again, it's not all on the manager. The employees certainly need to take responsibility for their own performance, for their own improvement. Okay, but it's not just all on the employee in terms of responsibilities. The managers have responsibilities as well. So managers need to observe their subordinates, observe employees to make sure that they are doing the job correctly. So observation and documentation, this data needs to be collected. So when managers and employees meet during performance management meetings, there's something to talk about. There's hard data to talk about. And, if a manager wants an employee to improve in a certain area, if a manager says, you need more knowledge in this area, an employee may think, oh, wow, I have knowledge in that area. This manager is not doing a good job of observing me. They have no idea what I'm about or what I know. But if a manager has data, if a manager has hard data, whether through observations, if they could say, on this day, you did this, and that's why I don't think you have knowledge in that area. Or if they have documentation that says that an employee performed poorly on some task, they have hard data with which to They have hard data with which to use to form a plan of action with the employee and to have a dialogue with the employee about how he or she is performing. Okay, they have hard objective data. Okay, managers are also responsible for updating their employees, any kinds of updates to the performance management system, any kinds of updates just to the job in general, so the employees are not doing something that they shouldn't be doing and will get evaluated for poorly. These updates need to be brought to the employee's attention. Certainly feedback, managers need to let employees know if they're progressing towards goals. in a satisfactory manner. Um, Managers need to provide their employees with any resources that they may need to do the job correctly. And then certainly reinforcement also has to do with feedback. So let employees know what they're doing right and reward them for it. Okay, and certainly if employees are doing something very wrong, then it's possible that a punishment is in order as well. Both are types of reinforcement. Okay. So let's move on to performance assessment. Okay, so we have a few different types of performance assessment here. We have the manager assessment, an employee self-assessment, and then other sources other sources of assessment such as peer evaluations or customer satisfaction. Customers could be a customer satisfaction survey form or customer interviews, something like that. So these are all fairly self-explanatory. Managers assessing their employees assessing themselves, and then the other sources like we talked about. So why do we need different assessments? Well, this increases employee ownership. So if an employee has just their manager saying, you did this wrong, or I need improvement in this area, it may be that the employee might take that personally or not really take it seriously. They might say, oh, well, this manager doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe he has it in for me. Something like that. He doesn't really know me. But if an employee gets a poor, well, I don't want to say poor, but if an employee gets a certain assessment from a manager, they get a similar assessment from a peer or a customer, then they may start to think, well, okay, well, I'm getting this feedback from multiple sources. Maybe it is true. Maybe I need to really examine this. So that's how employee ownership can increase with multiple assessments. And then commitment as well. It's the same thing. If there are multiple sources telling the employee that improvement needs to be shown in a certain area, then that employee is more likely to do that. Just more information. Just the more sources lead to more information. Just the sheer amount of information. That's about it for that. Let's move on to performance review. Okay, so this is sort of an overview of the entire performance appraisal meeting. So with performance review, managers and employees want to look at the employee's past behaviors and past results that they've achieved. Okay, they want to look at the present, so the compensation to be received, any sort of reinforcements in terms of rewards to be provided to the employee for the behaviors for that employee's behaviors and for the results that employee has achieved. And then you're going to look to the future. So that was like we discussed, developing goals, those specific goals, or those more broad goals, and development plans, how the employee is going to improve his or her own knowledge, skills, or abilities. Okay. So performance reviews, there are 6 steps that should be conducted for performance reviews. You want to identify what the employee has done well and done poorly. That's the past part of it. Solicit feedback and discuss the implications of the employee's behaviors. That's the present part of the performance review. And then explaining how skills used in the past have been helping the employee to overcome any performance problems or achieve goals. So that's present as well. So sort of helping the employee to understand how the past and how the employee's improvement up to this point, how that has been influencing the present, how that's been influencing the employee's compensation or their status in the company, their position in the company. And then for the future, step 5 and 6, you want to agree on an action plan, okay, an action plan for the future, what the employee is going to do from this point forward. And then you're going to set up the next meeting. You're going to agree on certain behaviors, actions, and attitudes to be evaluated. That's behaviors, actions, and attitudes by the employee that are to be evaluated at the next meeting. And again, any goals and development plans that are to be discussed at the next meeting. Okay, and then we have performance renewal and recontracting. Okay, and this is pretty much the same as performance planning. Okay, you're planning, you're preparing for the next performance appraisal meeting as a part of the performance management process. But when you're recontracting, you are using what you've gained, using what you've learned from the previous phases of the performance management cycle, and the previous meetings, the previous performance appraisal meetings, the employee's improvement up to this point in time. All this is going to influence the recontracting. You know, this might influence how long the evaluator, the manager, supervisor, and the employee meet for. It might influence the type of information that's discussed. Might influence it might influence the dynamic of the conversation. So these are things that need to be considered when recontracting for the next performance management meeting. Okay. So here we are on the last slide. Just a few key points. It's an ongoing process. Please refer to that slide at the beginning that laid it out in sort of a flow chart. That's going to be important. And each component of that process, each component of that chart, each bubble on that flow chart is very important. And when just one piece of the performance management process is implemented poorly, the whole system suffers. And this is going to be, and links between components must be clear. It must be a smooth transition from each step to the next, okay? Each step should prepare for the next step and the next step and the next step, etc. And if one bubble on that chart and that system is implemented poorly, then the whole system is going to suffer. Okay, and I don't want to get into that too much now. This is going to be the topic of assignment 2 for the week. It's very important to understand. So that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in again this week, and great work on everything so far. I see people are doing quite well on the quizzes and a lot of great discussion. So thank you so much for participating and giving some great effort so far. Good luck this week on your quiz and your assignment. That's about it.